Vlatko, you and I joined, the studio show to sort of give our quick, pre-game reactions to both
Tough,
sides
tough. If
of the
anyone can
volume.
hear, Sandra, can you give us tough again?
It's still tough, Lisa. It's still too ugly for feedback. I'm still sitting here not knowing if I could give it to the people. But I think maybe in the United States side of things, we start there because I think if
Mhm.
you and I go back to our preview a little bit of this game, and we talked about it being the final group match. We talked about Andonovsky and the coaching staff and perhaps what we would see from the starting 11. And naturally, we saw, shout out to Maximo, it is tough. We did see rotation in this one. And one of the things that, you brought up for us specifically in this preview was that goalkeeper position. So maybe let's start with this starting 11 and a little bit of the news that maybe helped shape this starting 11 because similarly to the roster being named for this tournament, things like maternity leave and injury helping shape the roster going in, we've got some player adjustments that were made due to injury and COVID protocol that perhaps shaped the final starting 11 in this match. So ahead of this game, Emily Fox is placed as someone who's unavailable for this match because she's out under COVID protocol at the moment. And then there was also the news of Ashley Hatch ultimately being pulled from the tournament due to an injury to her back, suffering a back strain through the competition. So unavailable moving forward. And Sam Coffey has been brought in to sort of close out the remainder of these games with the United States women's national team. So we get that news drop. We get this adjacent, like in line with the drop of the starting 11, Lisa, and we see Casey Murphy in net. Kelly O'Hara, Sarah Brun, Noemi Girma, Sonnet Sullivan, Herrera, Sanchez Smith, Alex Morgan, and Margaret Purse lining up in this one. Was there anything that sort of stood out for you or shocked you or didn't shock you as you saw this 11 drop?
So you're asking specifically about the 11 because, as you said, all of this news dropped at the exact same time. Yeah. So looking at the news first, Ashley Hatch being out, devastating, right? Like this was a huge moment for this type of player. Losing Fox for this game due to COVID protocol, I wasn't too concerned about that. I think that kind of goes into play with the looking at the starting lineup for me, though. Vlatko Andonovsky bringing Sam Coffey in, I'm very excited about that. Huge props to Sam Coffey, Portland Thorns midfielder. This is well deserved for her, and we need someone else at the 6. But when then looking at this starting lineup, knowing that Emily Fox is out, that makes more sense as to why Sonnet was going to get the start, frankly, to me. Because Emily Fox had that position locked down. And although Vlatko Andonovsky could have player rotation in that left back role, which is needed, right? God forbid there's an injury or a COVID protocol. You need other players that can slot into that role seamlessly. But Fox, that was her role and that was where she was going to start. And perhaps if Fox did get the start in that left back role, it would have been a different game because Fox plays incredibly different than Emily Sonnet, than even Kelly O'Hara, because Fox is just attacking the sidelines constantly. She is getting into the attacking end. She's combining more with Sophia Smith. They would have both been on that left side. So initially having Sonnet starting in that role instead of Emily Fox was the biggest thing for me. We did talk about the goalkeepers a little bit and Casey Murphy and Alyssa Nair. I think we decided, if I remember correctly, that Alyssa Nair was going to start. I kind of thought that like she'd get back on that, but I'm happy with Murphy getting the start. I think it's really a toss up between those two at this point, and maybe it comes down to how the player's feeling and how they did training wise the day before. But Sauerbrunn, Girma in the back line, Sullivan, Haran, pretty happy with all of that. Knowing that Hatch wasn't there, good to see Morgan get the start. And I was actually happy to see Margaret Purse, Midge Purse, get the start in the front line because I think she had a very good game the last time the U.S. went out against Jamaica. She came in off the bench and had a huge spark to the game and added so much to it. And in the first 45, I think Margaret Purse did so much for this side, for this U.S. side. But Emily Sonnet getting the start was huge for me. And then understanding that Fox couldn't be there is almost like a qualifier for it.
Yeah, for me, when I was looking at it, I was like, maybe this is a mix. We're still seeing this. We're seeing a mix of things here in this starting 11. There's, knowing that you have some players unavailable and you're going to make some adjustments positionally in those areas. But we're talking about an outside back and we're talking about a center striker essentially in Fox and in Hatch. So we see the return of Andy Sullivan on the pitch in this one. We see Casey Murphy getting a start in that. So it was a little curious for me, quite frankly. Do I think that Murphy is someone who was going to be fine in a game like this? Yes, and ultimately that ends up being the case. But there's still that sort of thing, I think, at the back of everyone's mind where it's like, this is a major international tournament with many important things at stake. And there's a coaching staff that is still sort of preaching the narrative of we got to get players experience and time. And apparently you do that during a high stakes environment. And we're all going through it together, even as those of us who are watching it and sort of being tasked to cover it as well. So there was a moment where I was kind of looking at the 11 drop and I said, okay, this is going to be fine. This is fine. They're going to go ahead and perform well. These are all players who are capable. But I was also kind of like, okay, like there's still definitely some interesting energy here. I was excited to see Naomi Girma get the start again. I think she's been doing great, in her time in this competition. So great to see her get a second consecutive start. Was a little surprised at Sonnet, getting out there as up. But again, this is I think more fulfilling, out of necessity, being kind of a move like this is sort of forcing the coach's hand when you have a player who's out, in COVID, under COVID protocol. And I was also excited to see Ashley Sanchez, out there more because this is a player that I really did want to see during this tournament specifically, and wanted to see what she would look like maybe against a team specifically like Mexico, where perhaps there would be a little bit of challenges in that middle third because, Mexico tends to be kind of, they could go toe-to-toe sometimes with the middle third at times. So I was like, let's see what this looks like in this game. And honestly, Lisa, we got to talk about this first half because it closes out scoreless. This Mexico, I guess, small victories, right? I guess if you're looking at Mexico's side of the ball, they succeeded in finally not conceding from the opposition in under 10 minutes. So bravo, like congratulations to them. So they tasked, I guess, themselves with that. And they were able to keep the United States off the scoreboard for not just the first opening 15 to 20 minutes, but throughout the duration of the first half. And a couple of looks for the United States, but I wouldn't say anything that felt like the game was getting out of control for Mexico.
No, and I think when you talk about this first half and specifically the first 10, 15 minutes, a lot of teams go in, right? Any player or team goes in and says, hey, the first 5-10 minutes after a whistle are the most crucial moments of a game. But specifically, when you look at how Mexico has done throughout this W Championship, that's when they've conceded. Against Jamaica, Bunny Shaw scored in the 8th minute or so. And then against Haiti, they scored in the opening 15 minutes against Mexico. So for Mexico, it was even more crucial that they held the scoreline to 0 in those first 10, 15 minutes, because once those floodgates open, we saw it happen to Mexico against Haiti. They get so much self-doubt. They come in on themselves and they cannot bounce back from that. And then going up against a team like the United States, that gives them the next step to get the second goal, right? All it takes is one. So to start this match 0-0 for Mexico, frankly, was huge for them. I thought they did a really nice job defensively, but throughout this first half, there really weren't that many opportunities. It was sloppy. It was a lot of back and forth. I think Mexican goalkeeper did a fantastic job. Gonzalez is just coming up huge with so many saves. Mexico was very organized defensively. And I think the center back duo definitely helped them in order to get that like rhythm down and have that organization. The best chance came from Midge Purse. She got a chipped in ball from Kelly O'Hara, who was actually playing on the left back role, right? We saw Sonnet on the right, Kelly O'Hara on the left. They ended up switching again throughout the middle of the half. There was like a lot of tactical movements happening with the United States back line. Becky Sauerbrunn was on the left side in the center back and Germa on the right. Germa usually plays on the left with her club team and with Alana Cook last game, Germa on the left. So there was like different tactics that I was looking at in the personnel, but then also how they were setting up on the field. But the best chance came from Margaret Purce in this first half. It was a long ball lofted over the top by Kelly O'Hara, who had cut into her right foot from the left side of the field, lofted it over the top. Purce gets an opportunity and just goes off the post like a hair.
I loved the decision making though. Like you're getting in that moment, and hey, take the shot versus saying like, let me try to make the pass and going far post, right? Smart, like
it was a great shot, and that's what Purce does. Like those are the moments that she can capitalize in, and frankly, she was all over the pitch. She got the ball in so many different times, and she was just attacking the flank. She was being creative on the ball, and then she didn't have much support. So it was Purce doing so much of the individual work one-on-one with her defender, winning that battle, but then she needed help. She needed someone to pass it to. She needed runners in the box. She needed that next step, and that's what the United States did not have, especially throughout this first 45.
Yeah, I thought for a second there it was like they were gonna get that. They were gonna break through. Like it was gonna be part of Mexico's story, a continued story for them this year. Like, okay, they're conceding at a certain point in the first half, and here we go again. But they get a little bit of luck on their side, perhaps the home crowd energy manifesting a post shot. Lindsey Horan being fed by Purce into some wide open space and then just shooting directly, to Gonzalez. So really just closing out that half scoreless with just 2 attempts on target, the 2 that we just referenced essentially. And despite having all the time on the ball, having the possession, just not a lot of moments that maybe tested that shape that Mexico was presenting to the United States. We're talking 5 total shots compared to 3 from Mexico, but 2 on target, just really the difference in this first half for the United States. And it was another game where I was a little curious if we were going to see the typical Andonovski coaching staff, halftime substitutions. But I just sort of also felt like, perhaps with this game right now at halftime being stuck 0-0, maybe this is the game where they don't do that, where they try to give this particular starting 11 an opportunity to try and go a little bit more in the second half. And ultimately, that's what they did.
And that's not what I wanted. I wanted change at the halftime. We've seen it so much from Vlatko Andonovski that he rotates so many, and I understand why he didn't, right? You're breaking down this Mexican side. You're 0-0 at the half. What are they going to do? What changes are they going to make? So if you can keep a little bit of consistency, you've talked to your players and you've reflected on the first 45, and now you've come in with a game plan as to how to tackle the next 45. So there was no changes made, but I wanted a change made, frankly. I wanted Rose Lavelle in that midfield, perhaps for a Lindsey Horan, who looked a little bit hurt throughout parts of this match. She wasn't attacking as much as she could have. And Ashley Sanchez wasn't as lethal in that role as we've seen her be in the past. And maybe it was because of the partnership between Sullivan, Horan, and Sanchez, but those 3 weren't working together well, in my opinion, throughout that first 45. So I wanted to see Rose Lavelle come in, perhaps for a Lindsey Horan, and then see how Sullivan, Sanchez, and Horan work together, because Rose Lavelle, because Lavelle can play those slip passes through. She has such great vision of that, and she'll push up a little higher. And then Lavelle with Sanchez, I love that combination. But ultimately, there were no changes made at the half, and that did not happen from Vlatko Andonovski's side, not until the 60th minute, late into this we see change.
I was like, okay, I was like, not right at the half, so maybe we were going to see something during the hour mark for this U.S. Women's National Team signing. That's ultimately what happened, but it wasn't just any change. There was like a massive personnel change. I was like, oh, okay, so we're just bringing in a handful of players during this hour mark. And quite frankly, with the tempo of this game right now and Mexico themselves still not on the board, knowing that this was a must-win scenario for them, and not just any must-win, they had to get a certain type of scoreline. Haiti had to be losing by a certain amount of goals, and that sort of was happening at the moment in time. And I just was like, okay, even if this is appearing or giving the aura or a feeling of perhaps Mexico's best game and maybe the United States not so best game of the tournament, there was still this energy of like, you're bringing in all of these handful of players and you're like, well, this is certainly going to end in heartbreak for Mexico. Are you kidding me? You're bringing in a Lavelle, you're bringing in Megan Rapinoe, someone who's not unfamiliar with being on the winning side against Mexico. I was just like, you're setting it up. Like, this is just setting it up to be an even potentially bigger heartbreak, I think, for the Mexican side. But Mexico, I think, to their credit, was also sort of taking note of the tempo of the game and the moments of the match, and they were also making some substitutions of their own to try to open things up a bit and try to perhaps make something happen on their side of things. They bring in Jackie Ovalle into the match and bringing out Carolina Jaramillo and bringing on Diana Ordonez, bringing out Alicia Cervantes, trying to perhaps get a little bit of some different offensive looks on their end. But unfortunately, I think this is the moment in which we could chat a little bit about the game shifting a bit. And I don't know if we can necessarily say it shifts in the United States' favor, because there's a moment where there's a very, very tough tackle, studs on ankle tackle by Ovalle on Lavelle. This is a moment in which VAR comes into play as well. It was a tough moment. Again, it's a moment where we got multiple angles of it. It did not look pretty. I said, well, that's a certain amount of crunch that took place there. And ultimately, the play was being reviewed for a red card because of the type of foul that it was. So after confirmation, you could see the official here, if you're joining us on the live, confirming on VAR that there was enough there to absolutely issue Ovalle a red. You could see the frustration and shock by Ovalle, who's saying, by my lip read, she said, primera vez, it's the first one, it's the first foul that she got in the game. How can it be? It's the type of foul that it is. It's a studs, direct studs into the challenge, and body language there also on the sideline from Vergara. You just know it's not. It's a position that Mexico does not want to be in. You're in a must-win situation with only about 15 minutes left in the match, and you go down to 10 players in this game, which is still scoreless at the time.
It is still scoreless at the time. I think that is so crucial to talk about because, and you just mentioned the subs. Ovalle came on in the 61st minute, and this red card happens around the 70th minute or so. Mm-hmm. So it just heartbreaking for Mexico in this moment, and you can see the frustration on her face and the tears that she's holding back. But this is a red card based on everything that Christina Uncle has explained to us, and she's taught me so much. It's fantastic because the way that the studs come in on the ankle versus the top of the cleat. If it was the top of the cleat, probably would have stayed a yellow card, but because the studs come in on the ankle higher up on Lavelle's foot, it's an automatic red card, and she is out of this game. So now Mexico's down, and this is an opportunity for the United States. Mexico ends up making a few more substitution, get some fresh legs on there, but ultimately, you talked about it potentially not shifting in the United States' favor. I don't really think it did. If anything, it changed the game because of formationally. And now the United States had to figure out how they were going to attack this new Mexico side that was sitting back a little bit more, right? Because they only had 9 field players, so they had to sit back and push less players higher. And it just created different space on the field. And it took the United States too long to figure out where that space was. Frankly, they didn't really figure out where it was. They couldn't move around Mexico throughout this game. Mexico was there in their way, blocking them and putting up a great fight. But I wanted more from the U.S. We've seen the U.S. do this where they pass and they connect, but it was the problem solving of the players on the pitch that wasn't wasn't good enough, frankly, from the United States side. And that's one thing that Vlatko Andonovski has talked about. He wants these players to problem solve on the pitch, do it themselves, and figure it out. But at what point do you have to change up the lineup and change out the players and give them direction or tell them what's not working? And I don't know, because that did not happen. It did not happen.
Yeah, it's a tough moment to sort of go back and look. I think you see Mexico to go down 10 players, and I mentioned about seeing a shift in the game. But we mentioned this and talked about it even when we were recapping NWSL games. We were talking about Angel City, San Diego, and how going down a player can sort of impact a game. But even for the team that is down the player, and you almost sort of see a surge a little bit from Mexico during
Sure.
time as well.